The herbalist's secret. The persistent drizzle had finally given way to a chill mist that clung to the stone buildings of Fenbrook like a damp shroud. Eliza Thorne pulled her woolen cloak tighter and quickened her pace through the narrow cobblestone streets. The basket on her arm contained the day's meager earnings, a few coppers and a small loaf of bread, payment for the fever tonic she'd prepared for the blacksmith's youngest daughter. The townsfolk regarded her with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. They needed her remedies, her poultices and tinctures, but they whispered about her all the same. The woman who lived alone at the edge of town, who knew which plants could heal and which could harm, who spoke to no one of her past. As Eliza reached the town square, she noticed an unusual gathering near the well. A group of villagers huddled around something, or someone, their voices a worried murmur against the evening air. Curiosity got the better of her caution, and she approached. "Make way," called a familiar voice. It was Martha, the innkeeper's wife, one of the few who treated Eliza with genuine kindness. "Let the herbalist through." The crowd parted reluctantly. At their center lay a man, unconscious on the damp cobblestones. He was dressed unlike anyone in Fenbrook. Fine clothes of strange cut, now mud-stained and torn. Blood matted his dark hair, and his face, though streaked with dirt, bore the refined features of nobility. "Found him just beyond the North Ridge," explained Garrett, the woodcutter. "No horse, no companions. Just him, stumbling through the fog before he collapsed. Thought he was drunk at first, but then I saw the blood." Eliza knelt beside the stranger, setting her basket aside. Her practiced fingers found the wound on his scalp, deep, but not fatal. More concerning was the fever that radiated from his skin. "He needs shelter and care," she said, looking up at the wary faces surrounding her. None volunteered. "The festival starts tomorrow," someone muttered. "We can't have a stranger dying in the square." "Take him to the magistrate," suggested another. "And what will the magistrate do that I cannot?" Eliza challenged, her patience wearing thin. "He needs medicine and rest, not bureaucracy." Martha stepped forward. "We've no rooms to spare at the inn, not with merchants already arriving for the harvest festival." Eliza sighed, knowing what she must do even as she resented it. "I'll take him to my cottage," she said finally. "Garrett, can you help carry him?" The stranger remained unconscious through the night and into the following day. Eliza cleaned his wound, prepared a poultice of yarrow and comfrey, and spooned herbal broth between his parched lips. By late afternoon, his fever had broken, but still he slept. She took the opportunity to examine his belongings. His clothing was of exceptional quality, finely woven wool and silk that felt almost otherworldly to her calloused fingers. A small leather pouch contained coins she'd never seen before, bearing the profile of no king or queen she recognized. Most curious of all was a small object that had been tucked inside his shirt, close to his heart. A smooth stone disc, no larger than her palm, etched with symbols that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. As the sun began to set, Eliza returned to the stranger's bedside to change his bandages. His eyes flew open as she leaned over him, eyes of such a startling blue that she nearly dropped her basin of water. "Where am I?" His voice was hoarse but cultured, confirming her suspicion that he was no common traveler. "In my home, in the village of Fenbrook," she replied, regaining her composure. "You were injured. Garrett the woodcutter found you wandering near the North Ridge." The stranger attempted to sit up, then winced and fell back against the pillow. "How long have I been here?" "Since yesterday evening. You had a fever, but it's broken now." She offered him a cup of water, which he accepted with shaking hands. "My thanks for your care, mistress." Eliza Thorne. "I'm the herbalist here." He nodded slightly, careful of his wound. "I am Aldrich Ravenswood of—" He paused, confusion clouding his eyes. "Of? I cannot seem to recall where I'm from." Eliza studied him carefully. Memory loss can accompany head injuries. It may return in time. "Ravenswood," he repeated, as if testing the truth of it. "Yes, that's right. But everything else." His hands moved to his chest, patting frantically. "Where is it?" "The disc, my father's disc." "It's safe," Eliza assured him, retrieving the stone disc from the shelf where she'd placed it. "I found it on your person." Relief flooded his face as she handed it to him. He clutched it tightly, the tendons in his hand standing out like cords. "Thank you. This is important to me, though I cannot recall exactly why." "Rest now," she advised. "The festival begins tonight in the village. The noise may carry to us here, but my cottage is far enough removed that it shouldn't disturb you too greatly." As she turned to leave him to rest, his voice stopped her. You live alone here? No husband? No family? The familiar ache bloomed in her chest. No, just me and my herbs and remedies. And the villagers allow this? A bitter smile crossed her lips. They need me more than they fear me, Master Ravenswood, though it's a close balance some days. The harvest festival brought 3 days of relative peace for Eliza. With the villagers occupied by celebrations, few came seeking her services, allowing her to focus on her enigmatic patient. Aldrich regained strength quickly, though his memory remained fragmentary at best. He could recall his name, his title. He was apparently some manner of nobleman, and occasional flashes of a life that sounded unlike anything in Fenbrook or the surrounding kingdoms. On the 4th day, as Eliza gathered herbs in her garden, Magistrate Wells appeared at her gate. The portly official rarely visited her cottage, preferring to summon her to the village when her skills were required. "Herbalist," he greeted her curtly. "I understand you're harboring a stranger." Eliza straightened, brushing soil from her hands. "I'm caring for an injured traveler, yes. A traveler with no known origin, no papers, who appeared mysteriously in our village." The magistrate's tone made clear his disapproval. In these troubled times, such a person warrants investigation. "He suffered a head wound and has lost much of his memory," Eliza explained. "He poses no threat." "That is for me to determine," Wells insisted. "Bring him to the town hall tomorrow at midday. The regional inspector arrives then, and he will want to question this." "Ravenswood." Something in the magistrate's tone set Eliza on edge. The regional inspector rarely concerns himself with lost travellers. "These are unusual times, Mistress Thorne. The border disputes with Orlanmar grow more heated. Spies have been discovered in neighbouring villages." Wells lowered his voice. "And there are rumours of strange happenings in the old forest. Magic, some whisper." Eliza kept her expression neutral, though her heart quickened. "Superstitious nonsense. Perhaps. Nevertheless, the Crown takes such matters seriously these days. Midday tomorrow, without fail." With that, the magistrate departed, leaving Eliza standing among her herbs, a sense of foreboding settling over her like the evening mist. Inside the cottage, she found Aldrich examining the stone disc, tracing its symbols with his fingertips. He looked up as she entered. "Is something wrong?" "I heard voices." "The magistrate," she explained, setting down her basket of herbs. "He wants you to appear before the regional inspector tomorrow." Alarm flashed across Aldrich's face. "What? Why?" "Border tensions. Suspicion of outsiders." She hesitated. "Rumours of magic." His fingers tightened around the disc. "And what do you think of magic, Eliza Thorne?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with significance she couldn't fully grasp. She moved to the hearth, stirring the simmering pot as she considered her answer. "I think," she said carefully, "that there are things in this world that cannot be easily explained. Herbs that heal when combined in certain ways. Dreams that foretell events yet to come. The strange light that sometimes dances over the northern moors on midwinter's night." She turned to face him. "Whether these things are magic or simply nature's mysteries, I cannot say." Aldrich nodded slowly. A diplomatic answer. A truthful one. She approached him, studying the disc in his hands. "That object. It's not from around here, is it?" "No," he admitted. "Nor am I suspect, though I cannot recall from where I hail." He traced one of the symbols, a curved line intersecting with 3 smaller ones. "Sometimes I feel that if I could just understand these markings, everything would become clear." Eliza made a decision then, one she might come to regret. "Show me your disc in the light," she requested. He hesitated, then held it toward the window where the late afternoon sun streamed in. The stone seemed to drink in the light, the etched symbols appearing to deepen and shift. "I've seen markings like these before," she said quietly. "In a book that belonged to my grandmother." Aldrich's eyes widened. "You have?" She nodded. "My grandmother was, like me, a healer. Some called her other things, witch sorceress. She taught me about plants and their properties, how to mix remedies that the village doctor couldn't comprehend." Eliza crossed to a wooden chest in the corner of the room, unlocking it with a key she wore around her neck. "She also taught me to keep certain knowledge hidden." From beneath layers of fabric and dried herbs, she withdrew a small, leather-bound book, its cover worn smooth by generations of hands. This was hers, and her mother's before her. She placed the book on the table and carefully opened it to reveal pages of handwritten text, diagrams, and symbols, some of which matched those on Aldrich's disc. "These markings," she explained, pointing to a particular page, were said to be the language of the boundary walkers. Boundary walkers? Aldrich leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the page. According to my grandmother, they were people who could move between worlds, our world, and others. Places where the rules of nature were different. Eliza felt foolish saying it aloud, yet something in Aldrich's expression told her he didn't find it nonsensical at all. She claimed our family descended from one such person, many generations ago. Aldrich's hand trembled slightly as he placed the disc beside the open book. And you believe this? I never did, she admitted. Until now. She pointed to where the symbols aligned perfectly with those in the book. Until you appeared with this. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the soft crackle of the hearth fire. Finally, Aldrich spoke. I think I was fleeing something. Someone. I remember fear, and a doorway, not of wood or stone, but of light. His brow furrowed with the effort of remembering. I was meant to go somewhere specific, but something went wrong. The passage collapsed before I reached my destination. And you ended up near Fenbrook instead, Eliza finished. He nodded grimly. If what you say is true, if I am indeed one of these boundary walkers, then appearing before your regional inspector could be dangerous. For both of us. Then we won't go, she said simply. Aldrich looked at her in surprise. Just like that? You would defy your authorities, risk your position here, for a stranger? Eliza closed the book, her decision made. My position here has always been precarious, Master Ravenswood. 1 foot in the village, 1 foot outside it. The people need me, but they've never trusted me. She smiled faintly. Besides, I've always wanted to know if my grandmother's tales were more than just stories. What are you suggesting? That we leave tonight. I know these woods better than anyone. We can be far from Fenbrook by morning. She gestured to the disc. And perhaps, along the way, we can discover what that truly is, and where you were meant to go. Under cover of darkness, with only what they could carry, Eliza and Aldrich slipped away from the cottage. She left a letter for Martha, asking her to care for the herb garden and distribute the prepared remedies to those who needed them. It was a poor repayment for the woman's kindness, but Eliza could offer nothing more. They travelled north, toward the great forest that sprawled beyond the ridge where Aldrich had first appeared. By dawn, they had left the familiar territories behind. By midday, when they should have been standing before the regional inspector, they were deep among ancient trees that few from Fenbrook ever ventured near. There are stories about this forest, Eliza said as they paused by a stream to rest. People who enter and never return, or return changed. Lights that dance between the trees at night, leading travellers astray. More boundary areas, perhaps, Aldrich suggested. He had been studying the disc and Eliza's grandmother's book throughout their journey. Places where the walls between worlds grow thin. As the day wore on, the forest grew denser, the light filtering through the canopy taking on a strange, greenish quality. Eliza found herself recognizing fewer and fewer plants, species that shouldn't grow in this climate, or that she had never seen described in any herbal. They made camp as dusk approached, in a small clearing beside a pool of water, so still it perfectly reflected the darkening sky. As Eliza prepared a simple meal from their provisions, Aldrich sat with the disc and book, comparing symbols and making notes in the dirt beside him. I think I understand now, he said finally. This disc, it's a key of sorts. A way to find and open passages between worlds. Eliza paused in her work. Can you use it to return to your home? Perhaps. He looked troubled. But I still don't recall where home is, or why I fled. Only that it was urgent I reach a specific destination. He pointed to a particular arrangement of symbols in the book. This sequence, I believe it marks a doorway, a boundary point. And according to your grandmother's notes, there should be one nearby. Here? In this forest? Eliza felt a shiver of apprehension. Aldrich nodded. Tomorrow, we should seek it out. If nothing else, it might trigger more of my memory. They ate in contemplative silence, the forest unnaturally quiet around them. No birds called, no insects chirped. Even the breeze seemed to have stilled. As darkness fell completely, Eliza noticed something strange about the pool beside their camp. The water, which had reflected the sky so perfectly earlier, now showed a different scene altogether. A landscape of rolling hills under a purple-tinged sky, with 2 moons hanging low on the horizon. Aldrich, she whispered, pointing. He moved beside her, staring into the pool. It's a window, he breathed. A glimpse of another world. As they watched, the image shifted, showing a stone city built into the side of a mountain, its architecture unlike anything Eliza had seen. Then it changed again, a vast desert with strange, crystalline formations jutting from the sand. Scene after scene flowed across the surface of the pool, as if someone were flipping through pages of a book. Suddenly, Aldrich gasped, clutching the disc so tightly his knuckles whitened. There! I know that place. The pool showed a verdant valley nestled between mist-covered peaks. At its center stood a white tower, its design both elegant and impossible, sections seeming to float without support, connected by bridges of light. The conservatory, Aldrich said, his voice thick with emotion. That's where I was going. The last sanctuary of the boundary walkers. You remember? Not everything, but enough. His face hardened. There are those who hunt us, the order of the fixed path. They believe the boundaries between worlds are sacred, that crossing them is an abomination. They've been systematically eliminating boundary walkers for generations. And they were hunting you, Eliza guessed. Aldrich nodded. I was carrying something important, knowledge that could help protect what remains of our kind. He tapped the side of his head. It's here, somewhere, locked away by my injury. The image in the pool faded, returning to the simple reflection of stars. Aldrich stood, pacing the edge of the clearing. If the conservatory exists, there must be a way to reach it, he reasoned. A boundary point nearby, as your grandmother's book suggests. We'll search at first light, Eliza promised. She hesitated, then asked, if we find it, if you can return to your people, what then? He stopped pacing, regarding her thoughtfully. You said yourself that you've always been caught between two worlds in Fenbrook. Perhaps. He left the thought unfinished, but the implication was clear. Eliza didn't sleep that night, her mind too full of possibilities she had never before considered. By morning, her decision was made. They found the boundary point shortly after midday, a circle of 7 ancient oak trees, their massive trunks twisted together in places, as if they had grown through one another. At the center of the circle, the air seemed to waver, like heat rising from summer-baked stones. Aldrich approached it cautiously, the disc held before him. This is it, he confirmed. A doorway, partially open already. As Eliza stepped into the circle, the disc began to glow with a soft blue light. The symbols etched on its surface rose up, becoming three-dimensional, rotating slowly in the air above the stone. It's responding to your presence, Aldrich said, surprised. You truly do have boundary walker blood. Before Eliza could respond, voices called from the forest behind them. Harsh, commanding voices, accompanied by the sound of horses and dogs. The regional inspector, she realized. And soldiers. Aldrich's expression darkened. Or worse, the order sometimes infiltrates local authorities. He pressed the disc into her hands. You must open the doorway, Eliza. My memories are still too fragmented. I don't remember the correct sequence. Me? But I don't know how. Your blood knows, he insisted. Trust yourself. Trust what your grandmother taught you. The voices drew closer. Among them, Eliza recognized Magistrate Wells, calling her name. She closed her eyes, holding the disc tightly, letting her instincts guide her. Images flashed through her mind. Her grandmother's hands turning pages in the old book, pointing to symbols, whispering words Eliza had thought were merely stories. The door opens when need and bloodline align, her grandmother had said. When the seeker stands between worlds, neither fully of one nor the other. Wasn't that her, always? The herbalist, not quite villager, not quite outcast. Trusted with life and death, yet never truly belonging. The disc grew warm in her hands. She opened her eyes to see the symbols aligning themselves, forming a pattern that matched the arrangement of the oak trees around them. The wavering air at the center of the circle rippled, then parted like a curtain, revealing a swirling vortex of light and color. Through it, distantly, she could see the white tower from the pool's vision. You did it, Aldrich breathed, wonder and relief mingling in his voice. He took her hand. Come, we haven't much time. Eliza hesitated, looking back toward the forest, toward the life she had known. Simple, lonely, but familiar. Your grandmother was right, Aldrich said gently. You were never meant for just one world, Eliza Thorne. The voices and footsteps grew louder. A dog barked, much too close. Eliza made her choice. With the disc clutched in one hand and Aldrich's fingers intertwined with the other, she stepped forward into light and possibility, the boundaries of her old life falling away behind her. In Fenbrook, they would tell stories of the herbalist who vanished during the harvest festival, some claiming she'd been a witch all along, others that she'd been spirited away by the mysterious stranger. Martha would tend the herb garden as requested, and in time, another healer would take Eliza's place, finding the cottage stocked with remedies and a strange, leather-bound book hidden beneath the floorboards. But Eliza Thorne would be elsewhere, learning the true extent of her heritage, walking between worlds with the descendant of an ancient line of travelers. The herbalist who had always lived at the edge of things would finally discover what lay beyond the boundaries. And perhaps, in time, she would return to share that knowledge with others caught between worlds, guiding them toward doorways they never knew existed.